All right, let's go on the record in State of New Mexico versus Timothy Busfield, D202 PD 2026-51.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Savannah Brandenburg-Koch and Joseph Stevens on behalf of the state.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Christopher Dodd and Amber Fairberg on behalf of Timothy Busfield.
Okay, thank you. All right, so parties, we're here today on the state's motion for pretrial detention. Prior to the hearing, I received the state's 6 exhibits and the defendant's A through BB. 28 exhibits.
Something like that, Your Honor.
The court is going to enter in the background history report and the public safety assessment as court's exhibits 1 and 2, but I think those are already reflected in what you guys have submitted. So those all being admitted, each side will have 1 hour for its presentation, and we'll start with the state, Ms. Brandenburg-Koch.
Thank you, Judge. Is it okay if I come up to the podium?
Of course.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. The state is requesting that this court find the defendant dangerous and that there are no conditions of release that this court can impose to secure the safety of this community. As the court noted, I did send exhibits. Defense has a copy of those as well. The state's exhibits are focused on what Rule 5409 actually requires. Pretrial detention is not a credibility trial. It's not a civil damages dispute, nor is it the studio's internal investigation, which is at best minimal and insufficient. It's whether the defendant is dangerous and if the court can impose conditions to secure the safety of the community. Thank you. And that's what the state will be focusing on. As I go through the state's exhibits, I will address some of the defendant's exhibits as well. I know the court gave the state an hour, so I would like to reserve some time for rebuttal as well. So the state's first exhibit is just the printout of Odyssey of the defendant's history here in New Mexico, which the state shows that there is none besides the underlying charges here. State's Exhibit 2 is the register of actions from the underlying case that we're here on, and just an event of showing when the criminal complaint was filed and the arrest warrant and when that warrant was served, along with the criminal complaint, which I will mostly focus on today. So I want to give some context, as there's a lot of defense exhibits along with the arrest warrant that is pretty lengthy. The named victims in this case, they started working on this show, The Cleaning Lady, in 2021. They filmed the pilot. They were asked later to come back for seasons 1 through 3. And that lasted until spring of 24. SL did the primary acting for seasons 1 and 2, although VL acted as well. And VL did the primary acting in season 3. Before season 4, there was a lot of back and forth with the children if they were going to continue to be casted in their role. After the 3 seasons, the boys were asked to audition, which is something they didn't have to do through seasons 1, 2, and 3. They had that audition here in Albuquerque in September of 2024. The lead actress in this show, her name is Elodie Young, and she was very close with the family. They went on vacations. However, she has not been compliant with this investigation. At that time of the audition, Ms. Young asked the mother of the parents to come to that audition and leave her husband at home. They arrived. VL was taken in a back room to do this audition, and then they left after the audition. Later, they found out that VL or SL was not going to be casted for the role that they've been in for the first 3 seasons. And only VL auditioned that day. which after they were released, the parents, I believe, posted that they were thankful for their opportunities, was very thankful for the show. Even though at that time the show was still using the boys, the victims in this case, to promote season 4. So eventually this brings us to the start of the investigation, which is the state's 2. There was concerns about abuse because the parents were being tagged in social media posts about the defendant's history. Because of those concerns, they asked their boys if there was any, with anyone, not just Mr. Busfield, but with anybody, if they were having any issues or inappropriate touching, anything like that. Or if they, actually, I think it was very clear that it was if they were uncomfortable in any situation. When the boys said, "Do you mean like with Uncle Tim?" Later, in November of 2024, the children were seen at UNMH. In UNMH, the doctor there is the one that referred this case, called the police and reported it, which as a mandated reporter needed to. So based off of the doctor seeing the children and speaking with the parents and getting a medical history, they had concerns about grooming and the sexual abuse, and they reported it to law enforcement. APD later.
So interesting little tidbit there. This whole thing was sort of the ball got rolling because of social media posts to the parents that this was a possibility, or the past of this defendant.
Because of the defendant's past, and they then asked their children, who said, "Oh, you mean like him, like Uncle? What did they call him?
Uncle Tim.
Uncle Tim."
Yeah. All right, interesting stuff. We'll take a break. We'll have much more from those hearings. Keep it here on Court TV, your front row seat to justice. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala here with Judge Ashley Wilcott.
And we are bringing you information about actor and director Timothy Busfield. We are in a New Mexico courtroom this afternoon. The former West Wing star faces charges that he sexually abused 2 boys on the set of the TV show The Cleaning Lady, which he directed. Now, Busfield does deny the charges.
Now, at his first appearance hearing last week, the judge ordered Busfield held without bond. That was about 5 days ago. Today, his lawyers are asking the judge to release their client on bail pending trial. The state is saying he's a danger to the community. Do not want him let out. Let's go back inside that courtroom now, where the deputy district attorney is now presenting her arguments to the jury.
I believe the same day were dispatched to the parents' homes. They talked to the parents and they talked to the boys. The boys did not disclose any sexual abuse, but did disclose signs of grooming and did disclose that the defendant had touched them. Because there was no disclosure of sexual abuse, APD essentially closed the case. CACU said they weren't able to take the case. During this time, after the doctor visit, I believe in November 2024, the kids then started therapy. I do want to note that in child abuse cases, I know the court is aware of this, is very typical that, well, one, officers are not supposed to speak with children, right, because of the power dynamic, and they want to make sure they're getting a reliable disclosure. So it's not uncommon that the kids did not disclose at that time or were ready to disclose at that time to a police officer that showed up at their house. Also, it's not best practices when interviewing a child according to our MDD structure by statute in New Mexico and across the country. Later, in February of 25, February 17th and 18th, there was a referral made to the SAG hotline about the boy that took over the role that the twins played. And that referral essentially said that a person saw the defendant kiss the boy while he was getting a haircut, that the defendant was intoxicated, and he had been drinking in his trailer as well. The next day, there was another referral made to the SAG hotline about how the defendant was alone with VL during this audition back in September. It's my understanding that the parents of the victims in this case did not make any of those referrals. Because of the liability and now these referrals, Warner Brothers did their own investigation and hired, I believe, outside counsel, Ms. Govern, to conduct this investigation. I know that is part of defense's exhibits. However, if you actually read those, the first one that was done in February, I believe it concluded in March, beginning of March.
I did read them.
Thank you. They didn't interview any of the necessary witnesses to what was actually reported, which I think shows you the reliability of the investigation as well. After that investigation was concluded and there was a report, it's my understanding that Warner Brothers or this outside counsel was calling the parents of the twin boys. They went to talk to a civil attorney on how to address any communications, and I believe their attorney sent some concerns or a letter, I'm not too sure exactly, but sent some information about the boys. That's the second report that, as you see, is not done until September of 2025. In that report, there are concerns of sexual abuse, and nobody, the independent attorney nor Warner Brothers, ever just reported this abuse. As we know in New Mexico, it's mandated that everybody, not just teachers, doctors, are mandated reporters, but everybody is. And so it is concerning that an investigator who is still investigating, even though they didn't talk to the kids or anyone relevant to that information, they still didn't report any abuse despite this letter. And they found, in both findings, they found that there was no wrongdoing, essentially, even though their investigation was pretty minimal and the witnesses needed weren't ever interviewed. Which now brings us, because that report was done in September 2025, which now brings us to how the boys then disclosed the sexual abuse against the defendant. It was during therapy, not the parents, to a neutral party that SL described sexual abuse by the defendant, and VL disclosed inappropriate touching. SL even disclosed in therapy that he was mad at his dad because he thought he knew that it was going on because he had the iPad or these links to watch his children. The therapist then made a referral. I believe that then a doctor saw the kids at Journey Pediatrics. Also, the therapist throughout their time had diagnosed one of the boys, SL, with PTSD because of these issues. In September, SL was seen by a doctor at Journey Pediatrics who also reported or indicated sexual abuse in that visit and treatment of the children. I also want to make something clear that the doctor at Journey Pediatrics in September of 2025 was the one who reported the concerns to CYFD. The mother did not call CYFD. It was the doctor. I know that the court is aware of this. However, it is the norm in child sexual abuse cases that kids delay disclose, and for many reasons that are also present here in this case. About 80% of children delay disclose. That's not only known nationally and supported by literature, but also in my experience prosecuting these cases. So it is not abnormal, but the norm on how the kids reported. It's also very normal that kids give a little bit at a time to test the waters to see what happens. As reported in their forensic interview, they talked about being scared. They talked about people being mean to them. And so that also shows why a delayed disclosure is typically made and supported by the literature. In October of 2025, October 31st of 2025, after this investigation started again with the detective on this case, during those safe house interviews, again, to a neutral third party, the boys disclosed the abuse. I also want to make this clear that the boys never said.
She is certainly not just going through the chronological listing of events, but also sharing experience, statistics, so the court understands, for instance, the delayed reporting by a child is not unusual.
Yeah, the history of the disclosure, which I think is very important in this case.
Absolutely. Stay with us. We're going to bring you more of this pretrial hearing. The judge is going to have to decide whether Busfield gets released or not. Stay tuned.
An affair with the family's au pair lead to double murder.
I'm gonna kill her, I'm gonna kill her.
It's a case of sex, lies, and deadly deception.
The Au Pair Affair murder trial. Live coverage today on Court TV.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, Vinnie Politan back in studio as the Au Pair Affair murder trial gets back underway. Catch up on everything you may have missed from today's testimony.
Closing Arguments tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV.
All right, I want to quickly get you back to New Mexico now for more of that bond hearing for actor-director Timothy Busfield.
He's been held without bond since surrendering to charges that he sexually abused two boys on the set of The Cleaning Lady, a show that Busfield directed. Right now, let's go in for more of the arguments. The prosecution making an argument as to why this court should not release him.
It happened when they were alone with the defendant. They actually indicated that some people were around and some people would leave. They never said that this happened when they were alone with him. So these arguments coming from defense and the exhibits provided don't add up with the testimony and with the kids' disclosures that they have given. The boys also disclosed how it made them feel and how uncomfortable they were. What's also noticeable is that when SL discloses the timeline of abuse, it matches up with the other witnesses, including his set teacher, the person that supervised him while on set, changed, that his behavior changed, that he didn't want to act anymore. He didn't want to be around anymore. So this isn't just coming from the child, but this is also coming from witnesses. His behavior corroborates what he is saying as well. What is also important and throughout this investigation is what the defendant told police. He stated that he would tickle and pick up the boys, even though he knew that with Warner Brothers, they weren't allowed to be alone or touching. But then later, he contradicts himself and says that he doesn't really even remember the boys, after he's already said he did tickle the boys, and it's highly likely that he did touch them. Not sexually, but touch them by tickling them in all of the other grooming aspects that the kids disclosed. So his own statement contradicts the letters really provided on defense's behalf. Something notable also is the defendant says that the victim's father very much encouraged the behavior to hug Mr. Busfield, and he felt uncomfortable, but he never told the dad to stop, that it's not, that we don't hug children, that we don't touch children. He never told that. He never said that. As you see in State's Exhibit 2, several witnesses were also interviewed. Lauren Trujillo and Taylor Trujillo, that also discussed that the kids weren't always supervised. And even the set teacher, Lee Lewin, she also said that she was in the main room where there wasn't cameras, but that she confirmed the iPads and confirmed there was a lot of people around, but that people lose track. There's a lot going on in these sets. I want to mention Danielle Vigil and Christina Carr, because now it seems like they're unhappy after they already gave a statement to police on how it was portrayed. The court knows that not everything in every interview is word for word in documentation. What is relevant to the allegations is what is usually in a criminal complaint arrest warrant. Especially this warrant was already quite lengthy. However, there is concerns that people have now got to those witnesses since speaking with police, and now they're writing affidavits on behalf of the defendant, suggesting that what they said wasn't true. So as for the dangerousness prong, State's Exhibit 2 shows that. Criminal sexual contact of a minor is a mandatory serious violent offense, which is different from necessarily dangerous, and here might not seem violent in the literal sense, but any deal of harm done to a child, especially when it comes to sexual abuse, the deal of physical harm.
All right, let's take this opportunity to bring back in criminal defense attorney Silva Megardician. And Silva, really, as she's outlining all of this, I feel a little enraged to think how often these children were unsupervised on a set, because I think I'm not blaming anyone if there was criminal activity by Timothy Busfield, but that's a problem.
It is, but Judge Ashley, here's the issue. TMZ reported this, so we're not absolutely sure, though they have been very good. They said that Warner Brothers has an explicit rule that adults are not to be alone with minors. And the prosecutor brings that up. She goes, look, even though Warner Brothers says that they can't be alone, there were people coming in and out of contact. So, this prosecutor is doing her job in outlining why he's a danger. But there are issues here, Judge Ashley. Saying that the kids denied it, well, that's because they're afraid of police officers. That witnesses changed their testimonies, well, because they were gotten to without much more evidence on how they were forced to change their testimony. I think there's a lot of juicy stuff that the defense can argue to release their client. I really believe that there is a lot more here.
Yeah, I would agree. There's a lot to consider here. And the defense is going to argue against this. But what the state is focused on is the fact that he's a danger to other kids in the community, talking about a calculated pattern over the years, his lack of boundaries, the fact that he's trying to minimize or deny his conduct makes it not a good thing. He has the ability, and they're suggesting maybe he has even tampered with witnesses. What do you think the judge might do in this particular instance? Quickly, I got about 30 seconds.
You know what? Sure, Michael. I think the biggest thing is they have to hear from the defense. The defense had put together a really large evidentiary base, not only attacking the facts, but showing about 70 character letters and the fact that he's not a danger to the community. The judge has to keep an open mind until he hears from the defense.
All right, fair enough. Silva, as always, a true pleasure to have you on the show.
Yes, thank you so much. Coming up next, don't go anywhere. We are going to bring you more of the pretrial hearing for Timothy Busfield here on Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julia Janae, along with Judge Ashley Wilcott. Good to see you.
You too.
Let's get back into that New Mexico courtroom where actor-director Timothy Busfield is in court today, but this time for a pretrial detention hearing.
That's right. He is accused of sexually abusing 2 young boys on the set of the TV series, which he was directing, called The Cleaning Lady.
But today, the defense released audio of the initial police interviews with the children, and they are heard on it saying that Busfield did not touch them inappropriately. Listen to this audio obtained by TMZ.
So, you know what's right and wrong, right?
Yeah.
You know no one could touch your private areas?
Yeah, but he didn't touch them.
Doesn't touch your private parts? Okay. And you know what's right and wrong, right? You know where people can't touch, where people can't do... Yeah, you know that, right? Does Tim ever do that?
No, he's never touched me.
Never touched you?
Yeah.
In like, you know, your private areas, right?
Yeah.
Never did that?
Never.
Yeah.
And Busfield's wife, actress Melissa Gilbert of Little House on the Prairie fame, is also at today's hearing. We want to get you back inside the courtroom for more.
That behavior when grooming children, engaging in grooming, and engaging in sexual abuse is inherently dangerous. The state does have other arguments to make on dangerousness when it comes to the defendant's history. And I want to make clear that nowhere in the case law and nowhere in 5409 or the F6 factors say that the defendant's history has to be charged criminal conduct. In fact, it can be unknown conduct at the time and what's presented to the court, which is laid out also in State's Exhibit 2 about prior allegations, and in State's Exhibit 3, 4, 5, and 6 of other victims, and the victims that we already knew have reported previously have come forward and gave a statement as well. So the first allegation, a 17-year-old disclosed that the defendant had sexually assaulted her, tried to serve her alcohol, and groped her. Unfortunately, at that time, what she reported is that the cops said that he wasn't going to be there much longer, and there was nothing that they could do, and there was later a civil suit filed in which the defendant later settled. That was back in 1994, and that victim was 17 years old at the time. Something I want to know about the kids' disclosures and all of the disclosures that were made prior and have been made since, there's a pattern. The pattern is all touching. There's a pattern of his conduct. Also, the boys' disclosures in this case, they were detailed, they were visceral, they were also not exaggerated, which I think cuts into defense's argument about what they think this case is. I say that because I think it is important when we're filing PDMs on these types of cases. If defense wants this court to believe that this is all about money, wouldn't it be easier for a child and all of these previous victims to disclose more than criminal sexual contact? It's shocking that all of the victims that have reported all report a similar pattern from the defendant, and they're not exaggerated, which makes the evidence in their disclosures credible. The second allegation occurred in March of 2012. It's my understanding that, and I believe this victim has called law enforcement as well, but essentially he had...
Is this one of your exhibits?
Yes, it's in stage 2.
Oh, okay.
Just,
Stage
yeah.
2. Okay.
The last page of the arrest warrant, Your Honor. Or the second to last page. In March of 2012, a 28-year-old accused Busfield of touching her inappropriately in a movie theater. She reported to police, and the prosecutors felt like there was not enough evidence to move forward, and he said it was consensual. Again, that pattern of touching, of criminal sexual contact is important for the pattern of the defendant, especially when it comes to the F6 factors, which I will get to. With the reports, even from the 2 victims I just spoke about, also shows that the defendant is dangerous, along with State's Exhibit 3, 4, 5, and 6. Rachel Wright was that victim, the 17-year-old victim. That's what State's Exhibit 3 is. I think what's also notable is that she felt, and you can see this on the second page of State's Exhibit 3, is that she felt like he was manipulating her throughout the process as well. State's Exhibit 4, these victims reported soon after, but this had happened a long time ago. The victim in this case, and I believe this has been reported to APD, but I think has been reported to Sacramento PD as well. That victim was 16 years old at the time. She was working at B Street Theater, a theater in Sacramento that the defendant and his brother started. I believe she was interning or working there, and the defendant again touched her, kissed her, and then stuck his hands down her pants, touching her genitals. Their report is that the defendant's brother and the defendant came to talk to the victim and the victim's dad to not report it, and that he would get therapy, which the family agreed with, and nothing went further in that case. State's Exhibit 5 is from the defendant and his wife's personal assistant. They worked, I believe, through the May of 2017 until 2019. And she mostly describes how the defendant was inappropriate, intimidating, that there was a lot of, this position of authority that we've kind of seen play out in this case and all of the other victims that have come forward. And had made comments to her about the way she acted and that he might have a crush on her if she continues that behavior. So there was concerns of inappropriate conduct with her as well. State 6, Claudia Christian, who is an actress, she has reported that when they were filming The Strays, the defendant and her, she was already casted as an actress, and during the show, they were running lines, which was common, and they went to his trailer. She stated that once she got there, he was alone, and almost immediately after she entered his trailer, he forcibly grabbed her and threw her against the wall, and started kissing her, and he had an erection. And she ended up running out and telling the, I believe, assistant director to keep her away from Mr. Busfield. Which those allegations also go to the defendant's dangerousness. So I think by clear and convincing evidence, the state has met the dangerousness prong here in this case. Not only because that people are coming forward and reporting this, but the way they're reporting, how the pattern is consistent, and the power that the defendant has had over all of these victims, and the position that he's played that role in. When it comes to conditions of release, the court focuses on the F6 factors. The first factor, the nature and circumstances of the offense charged, and whether that offense is a crime of violence, which the state has gone through and argues that we have met that, the nature and circumstances of the offense charged, and that this is a crime of violence. The weight of evidence against defense. It's still the state's position that the evidence is strong. The boys' allegations are supported by medical findings and by their therapist. And again, their accounts were specific and not exaggerated.
You know, Julia, I had read the petition for pretrial detention filed by the state, but they are outlining even more history than exists in that petition.
And trying to weave them all together as a similar pattern, even though we've got different ages, different time periods. It is interesting to watch.
Male and female, very interesting. We need to take that break quickly, though. We're going to get you back, of course, for more of the pretrial detention hearing for the actor-director Timothy Busfield.
And after just a short deliberation, the jury delivers a huge verdict and a win for the prosecution in the cheating fire chief murder trial of Kevin West. We'll have the details next when Court TV Live returns.
Tragic murder of Keith Canero and his entire family.
This one is the most brutal case that I've seen in my experience here.
The Mansion Murders Trial. Live coverage today on Court TV.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, Vinnie Politan back in studio as the Au Pair Affair murder trial gets back underway. Catch up on everything you may have missed from today's testimony.
Closing Arguments tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV.
Well, welcome back to Court TV Live. We will get you back inside of that New Mexico courtroom in just a moment. But first, after 2 hours and 16 minutes of deliberations over 2 days, the jury returns with a verdict in the cheating fire chief murder trial for Kevin West. This is out of Washington State. Take a listen.
All right, verdict in count 1A. We, the jury, find the above-named defendant guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree. Verdict count 1B is blank as required. Verdict count 2A, we, the jury, find the above-named defendant guilty of the crime of murder in the second degree. Special verdict form were Kevin West and Marcel West, end of it, partners, answer yes.
And you can see by watching, West was in disbelief as he heard the guilty verdicts of first-degree premeditated murder and second-degree murder read in court, and he kept shaking his head. Now, West claimed his wife, Marcy, died after having a seizure, but an expert for the state said she was strangled to death.
Now, West faces life in prison when he's sentenced on February 27th, and will, of course, bring you everything out of that Washington case.
Yes, absolutely. Right now, though, let's head back to New Mexico as the pretrial detention hearing continues for actor-director Timothy Busfield.
I want to touch on this a little bit more due to defense's filings. Defense first couple exhibits are about the victim's parents and their criminal history, essentially saying they have a motive to lie because they have a past, because they have had a conviction and had some other lawsuits. The parents aren't the victims in this case. The parents are not the ones making these allegations. The kids didn't even disclose to their parents. They disclosed to a neutral third party, two of them, their therapist and a doctor. To believe, well, first, during criminal proceedings, there is no money attached. They don't get money at the end of this process. For a victim to go through this is not an easy process at all. Defense makes allegations about how much the kids were acting, which is, they're quite a bit off, but yes, they were making money for working. And what makes more sense is because they weren't with Mr. Busfield anymore, is to continue to get acting jobs if they were about money. Not to come through the criminal justice system, because it's not guaranteed. Neither is a civil case, and there's no civil case that has been filed by the parents at this time. I think that argument doesn't make a whole lot of sense when looking at the facts and what we're here on today. We're here about what the kids are disclosing, what the crime charged is, and if there's conditions that the court can set, not about the parents' history. And essentially, what they're saying is that anybody that has a criminal history can never be a victim because they're going to lie. But this isn't about the parents' history. This is about the defendant and the defendant's history and why he won't comply with conditions of release.
Actually, I do have a question.
Yes.
With regards to the parents, there's reference to the parents having an attorney, and the attorney gave them the advice to seek out medical intervention in this case. Has there been a lawsuit filed, or is there plans to file a companion civil lawsuit?
It's my understanding that they are not filing a civil lawsuit. The attorney they talked to about what to do was a friend of the families. I believe one of their employers, actually. What do we do in this circumstance? It was more as friendly advice, not let's start this civil lawsuit and then...
Okay. That part wasn't clear.
Yes.
That it wasn't
yes.
planned. Okay.
I wanted to make that clear. And there is no civil lawsuit filed.
Okay.
Sorry, Judge, I'm just getting back to my notes. I think what is also important when it comes to the weight of evidence against the defendant is that we have corroborating evidence. That the defendant, once the defendant started directing SL, that's when he didn't want to act anymore or be on set. That there's been bedwetting nightmares. That other witnesses have also seen a big shift, despite defendants' affidavits. There are still witnesses that say, no, these kids, SL particularly, had a change in behavior after Mr. Busfield started directing him. I know I stated this, but I do want to make this clear because so many of the affidavits and so many of the letters of support say this could not happen because there were so many people around. The kids didn't say it happened when they were alone. And we see every day that sexual abuse with children can happen in front of several people. We know that from well-known cases. We know that from the Larry Nassar case, where he was physically and sexually abusing his patients in front of their parents. We know that these events and these crimes can happen in front of other people and them not recognize or see what is going on. The history and characteristic of the defendant, like I said, there's nowhere in the rule that says there has to be known criminal convictions, but a history, as I laid out, the pattern, the reliability of how almost all of the reports of sexual abuse against the defendant are all very similar and not exaggerated. That his history spans back 30 years, back to the 1990s. And this characteristic of the defendant, the state would argue, possesses a high risk, a very high risk of offense. Because either people are going to continue to ignore it, and they're going to continue to believe that the defendant could never do anything like this. And that he would never do something like this, which I'll get to his letters in a moment. I think what's also important to note is the defendant's testing that he did, this ABLE testing. When it really comes to risk assessment of offenders, which that testing really has nothing to do with risk assessment, which would be more appropriate for this hearing when the court's considering conditions of release, really has to do with if he's at risk. He's already been named in a lawsuit early on, back in the 90s, and the behavior hasn't stopped. In fact, it's continued, as we see in these reports and other allegations, and he's continued to get away with them. And so the ongoing risk of the defendant reoffending or continuing to do what he has because of the power of his position shows this court that he does have the likelihood that he could reoffend. The nature and seriousness of the danger to any person or the community that would be posed by the defendant's release. Pursuant to State v. Begay, I have the case if the court wants it, but I'm sure the court is familiar with it. The court must determine if the risk of releasing the defendant is one the court is willing to take in light of everything presented. This comes down to a simple question. Is the court confident it can set any conditions?
All right, here now to discuss criminal defense attorney, former head prosecutor Bob Bianchi. Bob, her demeanor is one that's not super impassioned, but what she is saying to the court is, number one, that this man is dangerous, and number two, there are no conditions that the court could impose to ensure that the community is safe. What are your thoughts so far of all of her arguments?
I think the prosecutor's doing an excellent job. It's not the time to be impassioned, and you're not trying a case in front of a jury. You're there to communicate dispassionately that you are not being excessive as a prosecutor, that this person represents a danger, that you're cool, calm, and collected in your evaluation of the evidence and in that opinion, and then asking the court to essentially say that this is a continuing danger to the community, and there is nothing the court can do to make him safe and secure from victimizing other individuals. Great job.
Bob, what did you make of what the judge said? He had one question about whether or not there was a companion civil suit. Do you think that was an appropriate question to ask in a criminal case? And where do you think that signals he may be leaning?
It is an appropriate question to ask, and I think, honestly, he was just kind of like trimming the prosecutor a little bit. Like, so this isn't somebody, the prosecutor's trying to make an argument, and the court's trying to understand. Well, you said that they didn't go to, they're just doing this for purposes of the criminal case, not civil case. Yet, I have in the record that they went to a civil attorney, and the prosecutor cleared up how that was. Because this will be a major motive or an attack down the line, one way or the other, where the defense is going to say this is a money grab.
All right, Bob, stand by. We're going to keep watching this, everything that's unfolding there in New Mexico. We have to take that break. But up next, we're going to take you back inside of the courtroom where a hearing is underway to determine if actor-director Timothy Busfield is going to be released on bail.
And the jury gets the case tomorrow in the Uvalde school massacre trial of Adrian Gonzalez. Crime and Justice correspondent Matt Johnson catches us up on the best testimony of the day. That's next. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Judge Ashley Wilcott along with Julia Janae. We're so happy that you're here with us. Now, before we go back inside the courtroom, let's turn to Texas, where both the defense and the state rested their cases in chief in the Uvalde school massacre trial for Adrian Gonzalez.
Yeah, this trial has been going on for many, many days, and the former school officer, he's accused of failing to confront the school shooter that killed 21 people back in 2022.
Joining us with all the latest is Court TV Crime and Justice correspondent Matt Johnson. Always great to see you, Matt. Tell us, closing arguments are expected tomorrow. What can we expect?
Julia, Judge Ashley, nice to see you both. So it's been a heated 10-day trial there in Texas. Remember, this was a change of venue taking place in Corpus Christi. And the case is now going to be in the hands of this Texas jury.
Members of the jury, as you just heard, both sides have rested and closed the case. That means you've heard all of the evidence in the case.
And with that, closing arguments expected Wednesday morning in the case against Adrian Gonzalez, the former school resource officer accused of not doing enough to confront the active school shooter at Robb Elementary back in 2022, a shooting that left 19 students and 2 teachers dead. During the 10-day trial, the jury viewed several photos of the crime scene and of the victims. They also watched this police body camera video and heard from 38 witnesses, including survivors and family members of the victims and police experts. Now, attorneys were also admonished several times today for arguing with each other in front of this jury. There was also objections during opening statements, if you recall that. So that's more of the fireworks that we can expect tomorrow. Something similar, ladies.
Yeah, wow, so much hangs in the balance there for this unique kind of case, Matt. The defense, did they put on a case at all? And if so, what stood out to you?
Yeah, Julia, so Adrian Gonzalez did not take the stand in his own defense. That was kind of surprising. His attorneys just called 2 witnesses on his behalf before resting their case in chief on Tuesday, including a retired officer who evaluated the defendant's response at the scene. Take a listen.
You would have stood there for 3 minutes?
Me?
Yes.
I wasn't there, sir.
You would have stood there for 3 minutes?
I was not there and experiencing everything that was being experienced. I think it would be an unfair assessment on my part with myself personally, my training, my experience. I would probably absorb information a lot different.
And quicker?
I would like to think so.
And go?
Or not, I don't know. It depends on what they were seeing at the time. I think that's what I mean about the context missing, about what he was observing in other places. That's just to be fair, sir.
So Adrian Gonzalez, by the funeral home tape, is still there for at least 2 minutes and 45 seconds.
Okay.
And every second counts in an active shooter situation, doesn't it?
It does.
That is, the 2 things that are important are the police officer to go to the gunfire, find the gunman, correct? Before the gunman gets to the victims.
Find the source of the fire. That's what you're saying, yes, sir.
And every second, more victims can die if a police officer is standing and waiting.
Gonzalez faces up to 58 years behind bars if convicted of all counts. He's facing 29 counts of child endangerment. Julia, Ashley.
All right, thank you so much, Matt Johnson, for all of the latest there in Texas. Right now, let's turn back to New Mexico, where a pretrial detention hearing is happening for actor-director Timothy Busfield.
Yeah, he is accused of sexually abusing 2 young boys on the set of a television series that he was directing called The Cleaning Lady. He has denied all allegations.
That's right. His wife, actress Melissa Gilbert, is in court as well to show her support of her husband. She's also issued a statement supporting him. Let's go back inside the courtroom together.
Conditions of release that, if violated, will be reported or can be monitored. And the answer here is no. When it comes to this type of case, these types of charges, child sexual abuse, there's no way the court can set conditions to make sure the defendant won't be around children, won't continue to engage in this behavior, continue to have witnesses provide new affidavits in lieu of what they've already told police, and a lot of other concerns, even a flight risk as well, and his compliance. I want to note the defendant's 87 letters of support. I think this is important when the court is considering conditions of release. Because how is the court knowing that there's, at the very least, 87 people supporting the defendant, and in these letters, all saying, I knew he would never do this, he could never do this, and he would comply with conditions, and I would allow my own children to be with him. How can the court set conditions knowing that all of these people blindly trust the defendant's word and not knowing any of the evidence that he's actually going to comply? It's only because of their relationship. And that's the concern here in child sexual abuse cases. We do have a great pretrial service division here in this courthouse, but they can't monitor these charges. The concerns for this court, the concerns that 87 people already have made their minds up that the defendant didn't do this and would never violate conditions of release. That shows you that so many people in the community aren't ever going to disclose if there is a violation. And what that also shows is that they don't believe when victims come forward. And that has been shown throughout the history of the defendant's 30 years where these allegations have come out. So although, yes, there's some argument that he has all of this support, that's great, people should have support, but I also think it shows the power that the defendant has over the community, this position that they blindly believe him and that they won't report any violations to this court. I wrote this in my motion that also when it comes to conditions of release, the defendant was notified about his warrant, or at least we knew he was notified because his attorney called our office on the 9th. That warrant was issued for his arrest on January 9th. Mr. Dodd called Miss Lyon asking her to cancel the warrant and that they wanted to avoid the extradition process so he could get here sooner and deal with what's in front of him. Miss Lyon told Mr. Dodd, we are not canceling the warrant, despite the email that they provided to this court saying we never responded. We had already responded prior to that email. That we weren't canceling the warrant and he can get here however he can. What's important when it comes to conditions of release is how he acted during these 5 days before he turned himself in. The state isn't concerned about the statement he made. What the state is concerned about is that, again, the defendant is using his control in deciding when he wants to comply with an order. That order did not say, sure, turn yourself in 5 days. That order was for him to be arrested and him to come deal with these charges. Instead, he drove 2,000 miles, as he stated in his statement to TMZ. He got a polygraph. I believe, at least from the report, it said it was done on the 16th, the same day he turned himself in, and that he did this ABLE testing, which I believe was the day prior. I'm not saying that defendants don't have a right to fight their case. They do, and they very much should. But what that shows, that behavior, that conduct, that shows this court, is that the defendant is only going to comply when he wants to, when he's ready to, when it's most comfortable for him. That's what the defendant has already showed this court. Not that he's going to comply immediately with these conditions that the court could set. Further, this court cannot they cannot have pretrial do house calls. They cannot confirm that he is not around children. GPS is not going to tell this court if he is around children or talking to witnesses or anything that the underlying facts of this case is the concern of. This is not a drug case where pretrial services can test them to make sure they're still not using substances. What pretrial?
Just want to point out the defendant there is shackled. It's not in front of a jury. That's not unusual, but he appears to be taking notes as he's listening to the state.
He does, and the prosecution making sure that they are explaining away what's about to come from the defense. All of the character evidence they're going to try to bring out about him. Good character.
Absolutely, and they saved a little bit of time for rebuttal to then respond to anything they missed. So we're going to step aside. The state wraps up its argument in this pretrial detention hearing for the actor-director Timothy Busfield up next.
Did an affair lead to double murder?
The Commonwealth's Attorney's Office has secured an indictment against Brandon Banfield for the murder of his wife, Christine, and the murder of Mr. Ryan.
Prosecutors allege the defendant planned to run away with the family's au pair.
So he killed his wife and another man.
He was saying, I'm gonna kill her, I'm gonna kill her.
It's a case of sex, lies, and deadly deception.
The Au Pair Affair murder trial. Live coverage today on Court TV.
Welcome back to Court TV. Let's get back to court for more in the pretrial detention hearing for the actor-director Timothy Busfield.
Pretrial services can do is nothing that satisfies the safety of the community. This court, and I do want to note this, that the defendant made through counsel an argument that this motion should also be denied because we routinely file these PDMs. As the court knows, I prosecute child sex abuse cases, child death cases, child physical abuse cases, the people where conditions can't be set. So yes, it is routine in SBU because of these offenders, because of how dangerous they are, how manipulated they are, how that no one wants to believe children when they actually disclose, when people point out anything else they can to actually discuss the facts of this case or the cases. That's why PDMs are filed. And this case is no different. And the state believes that there are no conditions that this court can set for this defendant and defendants similar in his position. I think I've addressed F6E, the factors to indicate if he may or may not commit new crimes. I think his history speaks for himself. I think his position and how he wants to control the narrative and how to comply also shows how he will perform on conditions of release, or if there is a likelihood he could commit new crimes. The last factor is if a PDM has ever been filed before. there's no other cases here in New Mexico. A PDM is not, and so that factor should weigh neutrally. Briefly, I do want to just discuss the ABLE. Can you tell me the time?
Yeah, you've got 15 minutes left.
When it comes to the ABLE and the polygraph that defense has provided. Polygraphs, although allowed here in New Mexico, I would ask the court give less weight to, because we don't have raw data. Defendant didn't provide us with that. And the polygraph does not address what this hearing is about. Those questions had nothing to do with if he was going to apply with conditions of release. And a PDM hearing isn't really for a mini trial to decide the truth about what happened in this case. So I would ask that the court give limited weight to the polygraph and also how that was conducted and when and what that really shows about conditions of release. When it comes to the ABLE testing that was also done before he turned himself in, really this is to show, it does not show anything about their risk. It shows if they are sexually interested in a certain type. And essentially, they're looking at a computer screen of photos. It's very subjective. It depends on the questionnaire that was presented before, which the state does not have. And it's also, there's a lot of debate about the reliability of the ABLE testing. And again, it doesn't address any conditions of release. Here in this case, it's really a risk factor to sex offenders. And if he's claiming he's not a sex offender, I'm unsure why an ABLE testing has anything to do with this, even to show that he is not attracted to minors. I think what is important here is not necessarily about what the ABLE test provides, but that the defendant had an opportunity to do these things. It doesn't matter.
All right, stepping aside from that New Mexico courtroom, we want to bring in our analyst who is standing by, criminal defense attorney and former head prosecutor Bob Bianchi. Bob, the polygraph that they're talking about, we know that Busfield has taken one. He wants that to be considered by this judge. How often is that looked at when we're thinking about or looking at something in terms of bail, but not a trial in front of a jury?
I think it's a very important thing as a defense attorney. And by the way, as prosecutors, it always makes me laugh when prosecutors poo-poo it, because we had a team of polygraph experts ourselves that we use for investigative purposes. It's an investigative tool. So when you hear that it's scientifically unreliable and maybe not admissible, it certainly isn't in New Jersey admissible in a court of law or at a trial, the fact that the defendant was willing to take it and the fact that he passed it, to me, is a very significant factor. Now, I agree with the prosecutor. I want to see the data, and I want to have an opportunity at a crack to have my polygraph person examine him to make sure it's on the up and up. But I think it's a significant factor that the defendant was willing to do it and passed it.
Well, what about the fact that, you know, the prosecution refers to the 87 letters of support that the defense has provided? 87 letters. Is that not a lot of letters in your experience or not, Bob? And what do you think about that many letters of support? Should it make a difference in a bond hearing?
It should make a difference. It's, you know, it's funny, the prosecutor again poo-pooed it, and I get it. That's what the prosecutor's there to do. But there is literally a jury charge that says character evidence is admissible at trial. You could go to trial, and on character evidence alone, the jury is charged. You could find a person not guilty on that evidence alone. So remember, this hearing isn't just whether or not he's going to be a danger to the community. They do have a standard of probable cause to show that he's guilty or that there's evidence to support the charges here. And so character evidence is relevant to that determination. There's nothing inappropriate. It's often used, and the prosecutor's denial of it, I think, was inartful.
Interesting. What a position to take on that, Bob. Thank you, as always, so much for joining us, Bob Bianchi. We always appreciate having you.
And ahead in the next hour, we are going to continue our coverage there in New Mexico. More of the pretrial detention hearing for actor-director Timothy Busfield. We'll hear from his attorneys as they fight to have him released on bail. And testimony wrapped up today in the au pair affair murder trial for Brendan Banfield. We'll check in with Court TV legal correspondent Kelly Craft, who's going to give us a live update on all of the latest. Don't go anywhere. More ahead on Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Your first order.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julia Janae. We are going to get you inside of that New Mexico courtroom in just a moment. First, here's a look at the other cases that we've been tracking here on Court TV. In Washington State, after 2 hours and 16 minutes of deliberation, the jury found Kevin West guilty of killing his wife, Marcy. West shook his head in disbelief as the verdict was read. He faces life in prison when he is sentenced on February 27th. And in Michigan, a mother offers an apology, a tearful one, at her sentencing after she pleaded guilty to murdering her teenage son. She admitted she killed her 17-year-old after her mental health illness spiraled. In her allocution, she apologized to first responders, friends, and family before being sentenced to 60 to 90 years in prison. And in New York, jury selection begins for twin luxury real estate brokers and their brother, who are all on trial for federal sex trafficking charges. Defense attorneys say prosecutors have unfairly prejudiced their clients by adding charges last week that they didn't have time to investigate. Now, opening statements are expected to begin in that trial on Monday. But for now, we want to head out to Virginia, where testimony ended and both sides rested their case in the au pair affair murder trial for Brendan Banfield. He is accused of killing his wife, Christine, and a man named Joseph Ryan, who was allegedly and unknowingly lured to the Banfield house in an alleged murder plot by the defendant. Court TV legal correspondent Kelly Craft has been covering this trial from the beginning and can explain it all to us. Kelly, what's the update today?
Hi there, Julia. Late this afternoon, the Commonwealth of Virginia rested its murder case against the defendant, in this case, Brendan Banfield. Now, tomorrow, defense counsel is going to put on a case, Julia. So defense counsel will begin tomorrow, and they have told the judge that they expect to call 4 to 5 witnesses in this case. The last witness to testify for the Commonwealth today was the victim, Christine Banfield's father. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Remembering Christine's childhood, did you observe any medical symptoms that gave you concern?
Yes, several bruising, bloody noses.
Were they more than the average child's experience?
Yes, yeah, it was a concern to a pediatrician as well.
Judge, I'm sorry, I'm going to object about medical testimony.
Objecting to medical testimony.
Your Honor, at this point in time, he hasn't testified to medical information.
I'll overrule objection at this point. Yes.
Thank you. Tell me about the nosebleeds. What did you observe?
They were frequent and very hard to stop. So the doctor was why we brought it to the doctor to go over that reasoning.
All right. Did you have to do anything to help her with these nosebleeds and bruising?
Well, yeah, we would do normal, put ice packs on the back of her head, keep her elevated so that, until it stopped, which was prolonged. It took quite a long time for them to stop.
And after these experiences, did you seek help of a medical professional?
Yes, we took her back to the pediatrician.
Christine Banfield was stabbed several times, prosecutors say, by her husband, Brendan Banfield, in order then to continue his affair with the au pair, Juliana Margulies. We also heard today from a blood analyst who testified that blood was all over Brendan Banfield's hands and that when officers ended up arriving, Brendan's hands were on his wife's neck. So, Julia, when defense counsel begins presenting its case tomorrow, we expect defense counsel to begin by presenting several other letters written by the au pair. These were jailhouse letters that she wrote while behind bars. They expect their case to last several days. Julia, we'll send it back to you.
Kelly Craft, thank you so much for that update. We will see what happens tomorrow. Let's, though, head back now to New Mexico, where actor-director Timothy Busfield is inside of a New Mexico courtroom for a pretrial detention hearing. He wants to be released. He is accused of sexually abusing 2 young boys on the set of a TV series called The Cleaning Lady. He was a director for it, and he is inside of the courtroom for this hearing where his attorneys are asking for him to be released on bail and perhaps asking for conditions. Let's see how they approach things with the judge.
Okay, Mr. Dunn.
Thank you, Your Honor. First, I'd like to let the court know we've supplied a binder for the court that has all of the exhibits and everything in it. It's
okay. I saw it.
Yellow binder there. Perfect.
With my notes.
Secondly, I'd like to apologize for consuming what I imagine was a lot of the court's time this long week.
It's okay.
So I'd like to tell the court how we intend to structure our hour in this case. I'm going to give some brief introductory remarks, followed by one witness. And then Ms. Fairberg will take over for argumentation. I would ask at this time that the court accept defendant's exhibits A through BB.
Yep, they're all admitted.
As reliable. Thank you. Ms. Brandenburg just referred to this mountain of evidence that the court has before it as speculative. This is not speculative. What the court has before it is, I would estimate, probably the most comprehensive response to a motion for pretrial detention that has ever been filed in this state. And it was amassed in 7 days. 7 days. And that's the evidence that we were able to put together. Every aspect of the state's case is flawed. Every aspect of the state's case is questionable. I don't need to tell the court this, but my client is presumed innocent. As he sits here today, he is an innocent man. And I have significant concerns about the prosecution talking as if he has already been convicted. She referred to the people who wrote letters of support. She said, quote, "They don't believe when victims come forward." It's our legal system that starts from the position of saying, we don't believe. It must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. The question before the court today is the court going to hold Mr. Busfield in custody pending the trial in this matter, if we ever get that far? There has not yet been an indictment. We have not received a target notice.
Oh, it's going to grand jury, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yeah, okay.
We have not received a target notice.
Do you guys have a date for that yet?
I do, but if the court wants it, I'd ask for it to be in private.
Okay.
Comply.
Okay.
The state's arguments are based on a fallacy. Their fallacy is heads we win, tails you lose. You don't bring any evidence to pretrial detention hearings, you're dangerous. We're going to detain you. You bring a bunch of evidence, that's how powerful he is. That's how terrible he is. We detain him. That's their argument here today. I want to compare the state's presentation of evidence with the defense presentation of evidence. 6 exhibits. 6 exhibits. That's what the state has brought. They've brought Odyssey printouts, and then really the meat of their case is a criminal complaint and several police reports, all authored by the same person, Detective Brown, the person who was in charge of this investigation. And as we make clear in our papers, there are significant concerns about what Mr. Brown, or Detective Brown, includes in his reports and doesn't include. Ms. Brandenburg, during argument, stated that, oh, well, only what's relevant goes into the criminal complaint. And Ms. Fairberg is going to play this for the court later, but when the children were first talked to by the police in this case.
The 2 audio clips?
Correct.
Thank you for sending those. I did listen to those.
Great. As the court is well aware then, it wasn't simply that the children did not disclose sexual abuse. They flat out denied it. They said, no, it didn't happen. The fact is that the criminal complaint in this case is slanted. It is slanted to bolster the state's case and omit exculpatory evidence. The evidence that we brought to court, the evidence favoring Mr. Busfield, cannot be used in the way the state is claiming. Oh, somehow bringing evidence should be weighing in their favor. And the court cannot indulge this kind of argument. Evidence favoring Mr. Busfield can only be interpreted one way, in his favor. It would turn our justice system upside down to say that if somebody defends themselves, it must mean that they are dangerous. It must mean that we should hold them in custody, because the ultimate result is that every single person would be held. The last thing that I want to talk about in my opening is this self-surrender process. Ms. Brandenburg said that it was 5 days. It was 3.5 days, Friday evening to Tuesday morning. All actions that Mr. Busfield took during that time were at my direction to mount a defense. I tried to negotiate with the district attorney's office. I told them, he's coming here, he'll come here. We do not need to go through a month or 2 month long extradition process. He'll be here. And they told me, you can do whatever you want. We're not going to do a thing. So I brought him here. He drove 2,000 miles in 2 days. 2 days. And then we spent one afternoon doing a psychosexual risk assessment, and one morning doing a polygraph. And then we self-surrendered at MDC. I think that shows how seriously Mr. Busfield takes this case. It shows he is ready to fight this case, and he is going to fight this case, and he is going to do it with respect for the law. An arrest warrant is not an order to a defendant. An arrest warrant is an order to the police. But my client, knowing that the police were ordered to arrest him, wanted to confront these allegations. So, Your Honor, At this point, I'm going to call our first witness, our only witness. And then Ms. Fairberg will make an argument. And so at this time, the defense calls Alan Caudillo.
All right, we're going to hit the pause button. We're going to get to our break and get you back in for that first witness of the defense. Before we do that, we do want to update you on a case out of New Jersey that we're following, the Mansion murders trial for Paul Canero. He is facing those multiple charges, including 4 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of not only his brother Keith, but also his brother's wife and 2 children. Prosecutors say he murdered that entire family before setting the house on fire. He's facing life in prison if he's convicted, and today jurors heard a 911 call from one of the neighbors who noticed smoke at Keith Canero's house and ended up finding a body.
I opened the door, and there is a smoke's coming out, and there's a person laying down.
Where are they laying down?
On the property.
Can you get over
in
to
front
them?
of the house?
All right, get over
yes,
to
I'm coming over.
Okay.
Oh my God, there's blood here. It's a corpse.
It's what?
It's dead.
What's dead?
Somebody is dead here.
Okay, sir, you need to get to a safe area. Hold on a second.
And ultimately, that body would be identified as Keith Canero. We'll continue to keep you updated on what's happening out there in New Jersey. We're going to get to our break. When we come back, together we're going to watch that witness for the defense take the stand in this bail request hearing that is happening for actor-director Timothy Busfield. Stay with us.
An affair with the family's au pair lead to double murder.
You say I'm gonna kill her, I'm gonna kill her.
It's a case of sex, lies, and deadly deception.
The Au Pair Affair murder trial. Live coverage today on Court TV.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, Vinnie Politan back in studio as the Au Pair Affair murder trial gets back underway. Catch up on everything you may have missed from today's testimony.
Closing Arguments tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV.
Well, let's go right back to New Mexico, where we are watching this pretrial detention hearing for actor-director Timothy Busfield. Many know him from The West Wing and Field of Dreams. Right now, the defense has called a witness who worked with Busfield in the movie industry. Let's listen together.
Good afternoon, sir. Sorry. Do you swear to affirm that testimony you give the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and the penalty of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Please have a seat. Have you testified before?
I haven't.
Okay. So everything's being recorded in this microphone here, so please just be sure to speak loudly and clearly into that. The
I can sit, right?
Yep. And the attorneys are going to ask you some questions now.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Dodd.
Thank you, Your Honor. Could you please state your name for the record?
Alan Caudillo.
And Mr. Caudillo, what do you do for a living?
I'm a director of photography on movies and television shows.
What is a director of photography?
Director of photography supervises all the photography for a project, hires crew, and in television shows guides the guest directors through the process of that particular show.
And as a director of photography, do you work closely with the director on any given project?
Yes.
And how long have you worked in the film industry?
Over 35 years.
How many projects have you worked on?
Hundreds of projects.
How many days of filming do you think you've done?
Thousands of days.
And are you a member of any unions?
I am. I'm a member of the International Cinematographers Guild, Local 600, and of the Directors Guild of America, TGA.
And have you worked on any projects that I might have heard of?
Yeah. Probably the biggest project I worked on was The Hangover. I was one of the directors of photography on The Hangover. Okay. And Hangover 2.
Now, I want to turn and I want to talk about The Cleaning Lady. Did you work on a television show called The Cleaning Lady?
I did.
And what was your role in The Cleaning Lady?
I was the lead director of photography for seasons 1 through 4.
Were there more than 4 seasons of The Cleaning Lady?
No, I was canceled after the 4th season.
So you were the lead director of photography for all 4 seasons?
Correct.
And as the lead director of photography on The Cleaning Lady, did you interact with Timothy Busfield?
I did. Tim came to us season 2 at the end of the season, episode 11. So he came as a guest director on that. And then they brought him back seasons 3 through 3 and 4.
For seasons 3 and 4?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Why did they bring him back?
He was well liked by the cast and the crew. Did an excellent job, and they needed somebody to help supervise future directors who were going to be guests to help them do that process for season 3 and 4. So he was a producer director for those last 2 seasons.
Okay. Yeah, what does that mean, being a producer director?
Part of it is really he's helping to make sure that each guest director comes in, understands the process, and knows the ins and outs of working with the cast, understands the quirks of the crew or locations, and then also he supervises editing and music things and casting to some extent. So he's there to be a guide for the series.
And so just so I'm clear, Mr. Busfield was involved with The Cleaning Lady for season 2, episode 11, and then all of season 3 and 4.
Correct, yeah. He was directed 1 episode season 2, and then I think 2 episode 3 and 2 episode 4.
Okay, so he directed a total of 5 episodes?
I believe it's 5. Yeah, I believe it's 5.
Now, have you reviewed the criminal complaint in this case?
I did read it. I saw it on deadline.
And are you aware of the allegations by, and I want to refer them by their initials, okay? Let's just make sure we do that, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Are you aware of the allegations by SL in this case?
I am, from that complaint.
And you know when I refer to SL, you know who I'm talking about, correct?
I do.
And based on your review of the criminal complaint, what is your understanding of the nature of the allegations in this case?
I'm sorry, I don't. My understanding of the nature, like what happened?
What does he say happened?
Oh, he said that Tim touched him inappropriately on set.
And was that during filming? Do you know?
It seemed to me from the complaint he was saying it was on set while we were filming. He had said, I think I remember reading, he said something like, when he cut, he would come in and that's what he would do.
Okay. Now, as the director of photography, did you work on every episode that Mr. Busfield directed?
I did.
Did you work closely with him on each of those episodes?
Yeah, absolutely. I work very closely with all of the directors, and that first episode he was a guest, so it was one of my jobs as we've been there for 2 years, is to make sure he understands our process, gets to know the cast and crew, sets and things like that. So we worked very, very closely. I never left his side.
Okay. And so is it possible that Mr. Busfield inappropriately touched SL on the set of The Cleaning Lady?
No.
Why not?
Film sets may seem chaotic if you're an outsider, but everything we do is incredibly regimented. We're all a group of professionals who all know what they need to do, a lot of times without being told. And at any given time, if the child was on set, there was at minimum of 10 people there on the set with them. It's just how it works. There's 2 cameras, 2 camera operators, 2 focus pullers, 2 boom guys, a prop person, a hair and makeup person, the studio person would usually be there, the first assistant director, 2 dolly reps. And that's for every take, for every shot, always. Especially with the children, because we had such a limited amount of time with the children. If they were on the set, we would bring them on and start rolling. because once they, the rules are such, if we go over, that's it, we're done, and we have to not shoot the scene and go over and spend a ton of money. So every second of their time was regimented. We often wouldn't even rehearse with the children, especially with these young guys. They weren't the best actors. They were, perfect look for the show, but they weren't the best performers. So we would rehearse with the stand-in, which was an adult, and then we would just bring them in and have them do the part. So they a lot of times they wouldn't even be there for rehearsals.
So Alan Caudillo here, he is educating this judge and the people in the courtroom on how things happen on movie sets. Let's bring in for some analysis attorney and former public defender Gabrielle Higgins, who is with us. Gabrielle, great to have you on this evening. Tell me what you're thinking about what the director of photography is talking about here, because this would be an allegation that this inappropriate touching happened during sets, like actual filming and cuts. I mean, that would be a pretty brazen thing to do if true.
I think that the role of this witness is to offer context to the court about what that environment would be like, to signal that it's probably less than likely that this could have occurred. Unfortunately, they don't have enough perspective to be able to say that it did not happen. And the role of the court is to balance both, obviously giving the presumption of innocence some teeth, but also keeping the community safe, not only from potentially future incidents, but they also have to factor in this defendant's access to resources and their ability to use their resources to evade accountability and responsibility. The attorney for the defendant has already laid out, obviously, that the defendant came forward, the defendant was aware of this warrant, so the defendant isn't going anywhere, even if they have the resources to do so. So this witness is less to prove that the defendant did not commit the crime alleged, and more to give context to suggest that it's improbable that this could have occurred without several people witnessing what is alleged.
Oh yeah, definitely think you're right about that. With this being their first witness in front of the judge, based on what we've seen so far, we know the defense came forward and took a polygraph test and passed that polygraph test. So that's something the defense is going to share with the judge. With what we have, where do you think the judge is going to land on this one?
I think there's a lot of options available to the court, right? So here in Florida, there's an option for pretrial electronic monitoring to survey and see where the defendant is at all times. There's an option for increased monitoring that may not necessarily result in a monitor, may require house arrest. There's several options available to the court to balance those interests of maintaining the presumption of innocence, but also protecting the community from future events. So we'll see. They may set a bond in this case.
Yeah, two very important interests to balance for this judge. Gabrielle, thank you for breaking that down. We're going to step aside. When we come back, the defense is going to be playing the police interview audio of the alleged accusers. Stay with us. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julia Janae. Thank you for continuing to follow along with us as we watch actor-director Timothy Busfield center stage in a very different way. He's in a courtroom in New Mexico for a pre-trial detention hearing. He's accused of sexually assaulting two young boys on the set of the series. It was the cleaning lady that this happened, allegedly, and he denies those allegations. He's asking the judge to grant him bail. Let's pick it up where we left. The defense is playing audio from the police interview, so we're going to hear the voices of the young accusers in this case.
And you know what's right and wrong, right? You know where people can't touch, where people can't do. Yeah, you know that, right? Does Tim ever do that?
No, he's never touched me.
Never touched you?
Yeah.
In like, you know, your private areas, right?
Yeah.
Never did that?
Never.
Okay.
Let's go on, Your Honor, to Defense Exhibit AA. This is 5 minutes later, separate. The boys were separated. The same police officer, this time speaking to SL, out of the presence of his brother.
So, you know what's right and wrong, right?
Yeah.
You know no one can touch your private areas?
Yeah, but he doesn't touch them.
Doesn't touch your private parts? Okay.
That's not, Your Honor, a failure to disclose. That's an express denial. And the officer followed up just to make sure he didn't touch your private areas, because the conversation before, I'll express to Your Honor, the conversation before that was, you know, does Tim tickle you ever? And they said, well, you know, my shoulder sometimes. Do you like it? I kind of like it. I kind of don't like it. And then they went into the conversation about the private parts. This was not a failure to disclose. This was an express denial. And I want to talk, Your Honor, about the medical records that the state has referenced. We did not submit them as exhibits, but given the state's argument today, I would like to read a couple of pieces from it. And that is because the state's made the assertion that SL reported to his therapist unprompted and, you know, not to parents. It didn't come from parents. And what we see from the records is that's not accurate. It's not accurate. This complaint is not credible. This is from, I'm just going to read a portion. I'm going to read a few portions, but this one is from one of the very first notes. And in the room are SL, his father, Ronald Rodas, and the therapist. These are her notes. And I quote, "Father then told client that client needs to trust therapist and feel safe to talk about the abuse so that client and family can heal." Only after that did then SL say, okay, well, here's the abuse. This was not a spontaneous disclosure that happened with someone he trusted. This was in the presence of looking at dad. And the reason we know that is because there are other medical records that say, there are so many things, and I want to make sure I've got the right one for Your Honor. Okay. There's an allegation in the complaint that SL was having nightmares, suffering from PTSD from this abuse. Well, what the medical records show is actually he wasn't having nightmares. When his father is not in the room with him, when his father's not in the room with him, SL tells the therapist that he's waking up at night, and I quote, "waking up at night due to being too hot or too cold." His father tells that client is having a nightmare when client wakes up, but client does not remember it. Multiple times throughout the medical records, multiple times, SL tells the therapist, "I wake up because I'm hot." And then the therapist says, "Well, why don't you tell your dad that you're not having nightmares, that you're just hot?" And then this is what he says to that. Client, quote, "Client feels the need to please his father and at times is scared to tell him what's going on due to fears of disappointing him." These aren't credible, non-exaggerated allegations. These are manufactured allegations. This complaint omits all of that history. But not only that, we know that it also misconstrues conversations with its own witnesses. I'd like to play for Your Honor Defense Exhibit S. This is a voicemail left, not solicited, left to the Busfield family's personal attorney. This is a voicemail from her.
Hi, this is Danielle Behill. I'm reaching out regarding Timothy Busfield. I noticed that I was in the police report for his warrant, and I was not very happy with how the detective twisted and used my words and just picked and choose what he wanted to put into that report. I don't feel comfortable with a man sitting in jail right now when I know what I said and that's not everything or twisted words into the report. So I would like to be able to speak with someone about that because this has gotten kind of out of hand. So thank you. My phone number is 505.
We won't play her phone number for everybody, Your Honor. She's not the only one. States, defendant's exhibit, I keep saying states, defendant's exhibit L is an affidavit of Kristen Carr. She says the same thing. She says that the detective omitted from the criminal complaint things that she thought were crucial. That set teachers never left the boys unsupervised, that there were always 20 to 30 people in the room, and that she never saw the kids ever alone or somewhere where other people could not observe.
All right, we have some big things happening real time inside of that New Mexico courtroom. So we're going to hit our break. And when we come back, we will have the judge's final decision for Timothy Busfield on this request to deny him bond by the prosecution.
An affair with the family's au pair lead to double murder.
Seriously, I'm gonna kill her. I'm gonna kill her.
It's a case of sex, lies, and deadly deception.
The Au Pair Affair murder trial. Live coverage today on Court TV.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, Vinnie Politan back in studio as the Au Pair Affair murder trial gets back underway. Catch up on everything you may have missed from today's testimony.
Closing Arguments tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
Welcome back. The judge is ready to make his ruling on whether to grant actor-director Timothy Busfield bail. Let's watch together.
The court finding as follows. The question is whether or not the state has proven by clear and convincing evidence that there are no release conditions that would reasonably protect the safety of any other person or the community. It's broken down into the three-part analysis articulated in State versus Groves, and in that analysis, the court considers the factors enumerated in Rule 549F6 as required by State versus Anderson. The first question is whether or not the information proffered carries sufficient indicia of reliability to be worthy of consideration. I do find that the state's 6 exhibits and the defendant's 28 exhibits and the court's 2 exhibits and the testimony offered today are reliable for purposes of this decision. The next question is the dangerousness question, the extent to which that information indicates that the defendant may likely pose a threat to the safety of others if released pending trial. I'll back up and note that probable cause was found by the Metropolitan Court judge. We're not set for a preliminary hearing today. I do find that that is sufficient for a probable cause finding for today's purposes. So, as to the dangerousness question, based on the nature and circumstances of the present offense, noting that this is a crime where the allegations involve criminal sexual contact of minor children in the genital areas, I do find that is inherently dangerous. So I'm satisfied based on those that the state has proven that Mr. Busfield does pose a danger to the safety of others. As to the last question, whether there are any potential pretrial release conditions that would reasonably protect the safety of others, I'll work my way through the F6 factors, first adopting my findings about the nature and circumstances of the present offense. I'll move on to the weight of the evidence. Now, Ms. Brandenburg-Koch is right. It's important to acknowledge the nature of sexual assault cases and delays in reporting, especially from minor alleged victims, are fairly common. That sort of sexual abuse often occurs in the dark. This situation is a little different in that the allegations involve the defendant being alleged to have committed these acts on a film set. Now, the defendant's presentation, the affidavits from a number of people who worked on that film set, the independent investigation performed by the law firm hired by Warner Brothers, the testimony offered today do not corroborate the allegations offered by the alleged victims in this case. Now, while true, the statement from those children to law enforcement initially and expressly denied that anything occurred, the children then subsequently reported these things. That's not uncommon. As it stands today, based on the limited information I have in front of me, I'll characterize the weight of the evidence against the defendant as neutral at this point in time. As to the defendant's history and characteristics, as included or reflected in Court's Exhibit 1, this defendant exhibits 0 criminal history, no misdemeanor or felony history. The state has brought forth a number of allegations over the last 30 years, something of a pattern involving allegations of this defendant committing some sort of sexual contact against post-pubescent women. Now, these allegations have not been vetted by the judicial system for various reasons. There being a civil settlement in one of those, a declined prosecution, or no action taken on the exchange of the defendant engaging in therapy. I understand that given the media attention to this case, that more people may come forward with other allegations supporting this pattern. But at this point in time, it's difficult for the court to put too much weight into those allegations as they've not been vetted by the judicial system. I'm concerned about the allegations of this defendant using his position of power on the film set to advance his own personal motive. But the affidavits offered by other people working on the film set do not show that Mr. Busfield has used or abused that position of power. With regards to the nature and seriousness of the danger posed, I'm very mindful of the higher court's guidance in the Begay case in weighing this defendant's risk of reoffending. But given the lack of a pattern involving children in this case, I think that can be remedied through different conditions of release. For factor E, I don't find that there's been sufficient presentation that this defendant may commit new crimes if released pending trial. There's no evidence of a pattern of criminal conduct. There are no similar allegations involving children in his past. There's no evidence of non-compliance with prior court orders. Rather, this defendant self-surrendered and submitted himself to this court's jurisdiction, demonstrating compliance with the court order for his arrest. There's not been any prior pretrial detention finding. So on the balance, I cannot find that the state has proven by clear and convincing evidence that there are no release conditions that would reasonably protect the safety of any other person in the community. So I am denying the state's motion. I'll take care of that order. That'll be published tomorrow. So Mr. Busfield, I'll set the following conditions of release. You're authorized for release under our recognizance with the conditions that you appear at all future court settings. You not violate any laws. You'll be supervised by pretrial services here in Albuquerque at a level 2. I'm not going to prohibit your travel. I understand you may not live here, but you will need to report to pretrial services here. You're not to possess any firearms or dangerous weapons. You're not to possess or consume any alcohol or illegal drugs. You must notify the court of your address. You're not to have any contact with the alleged victims or their families, and you're also not to discuss the case with any witnesses. That's what the attorneys and their investigators are there to do. And we can't have you tamper with any of that. And then you need to maintain weekly contact with your attorney in this case. So, Mr. Busfield, do you have any questions for me about what any of those conditions mean?
No, sir.
Okay. So, attorneys, I'll take care of that order tomorrow. Is there anything else the state would request, Ms. Brandenburg?
I would ask for no contact with children under the age of 18.
Oh, yeah, sorry. No unsupervised contact with any minor children in this case. Mr. Dodd, any other conditions you'd request?
No, Your Honor. I would ask just if the court can get that filed through your TCAA today so that I can...
Oh, this conditions of release? Yeah.
Yes.
I've already, yeah. That'll be filed today. I'll take care of the full detention order.
So the image that we're seeing right there on your screen, that's the wife of Timothy Busfield, very well known in her own right, Melissa Gilbert, who, of course, gained fame as a child actor on Little House on the Prairie. She's been very vocal. through her letters to the court about her support for her husband, telling the court that he's a sweet person, that he would never do something like this. So she clearly reacting there emotionally to the judge's big decision here.